Well, good afternoon, my friends, or rather good evening, and welcome to Carpo's Corner. Here I am again, talking to the camera, and I have, to be brutally honest with you, I've been doing this for what, 13 years now, and I always have something to say. And that's kind of part of the topic today, which is really if you have something to say, you should say it. But I should start with a disclaimer. I'm not the kind of person who thinks what my opinion is or the things I say matter. In other words, I watch many channels on YouTube. It's kind of my home for knowledge, information. I mean, it's just everybody's got their home, right? But YouTube has really changed over the years. It's changed from being a place to upload my honest, raw thoughts and share with other people their honest, raw thoughts, and gradually whittled down into just a place to hear about controversy and get clicks for people. I survived the YouTube purge, as they called it, which I think was maybe back in sometime around, 2015, 16. Now, no, that was a different one. There was an early one, and then there was another one around 2020. But anyway, the whole point was that a lot of channels got deleted or canceled, but a lot of people left YouTube because they felt like they couldn't express their true opinions, their thoughts about what's really going on in their minds as far as they're concerned. And there was a time when we could actually disagree on topics rationally. That's not to say the comment section was any more peaceful. It was worse, believe me. There was a lot of extremely xenophobic, hateful, racist comments in there. And honestly, most of the time it was to get attention. Many of the most hardcore people don't spend all their time online. The chronically online person back then was, the shit poster that would just look to rile people up because, as you learn when you have kids, and hopefully you learn before you have kids, if you do, that any attention is still attention, even negative attention. So ignoring some kid who's kicking and throwing a tantrum, they'll keep looking at you. Like, why aren't you looking at me? And why aren't you mad? And eventually they stop. Did I think world politics would become that way? Like kids throwing a tantrum, saying, look at me, trying to get the next news article to talk about them. They call it the attention economy, and it's a very real thing. And I do not want to be part of it, but I have to be part of it, and so do you. And what I mean by that is if you go to work and let's say you go to apply for a job, you're selling yourself to that company. You're putting yourself out there as a certain kind of person, a type of person. And the question is always, what kind of person do you want to be? I haven't applied for a job in quite a while. Well, the last two jobs in carpentry, I mean, interviewing to do construction is a little bit different from a lot of, like, say, tech sector jobs. It's like, hey, man, what can you do? And, all right, cool. Here's our pay and here's our standards and our values. If you even get that. But the company I'm working for now had a very long sheet of, I'm not going to say it very kind of DEI like policies, right? But in the sense of just we treat everyone equally, and we're an honest company that cares about all people and treat all of our customers equally. It seems like a very simple thing. But this year, in 2025, just saying something like that, like, oh, I'm all about diversity, you become an enemy to a huge portion of the population. And it's fascinating because there's no nuance there. Let me bring up the word woke, right? I hate that word. Everybody hates that word now. But to just a quick 30-second history, woke originally related to the African Americans that went through the civil rights movement, and woke was being aware of racial injustice in America, which is a fact. We have it. There was redlining. They, different districts and lines were drawn so black people couldn't vote. They weren't allowed to get loans for housing. This is just history. Okay, so what we do is we look at it and we go, okay, that was fucked up, and we move on. But there are a certain group of people who just deny it. And right now, the political viewpoint is to deny, 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 and just completely ignore anybody who has a criticism. Even when your administration gets caught like doing a group chat on Signal about, dropping bombs on Syria, right? So all this, I don't want to get into the political side because I know there's already some Trump supporter who's offended by that. The fact is, what everyone's saying is it's okay. Shit happens. But own it. And what this got me thinking about was when I was raised, when I was growing up, I was taught values by my parents and by society in general, my teachers, my peers. And those were things like be honest, right? Speak your mind honestly and say it like you really feel. Treat people with dignity and respect. Be kind to the less fortunate. Be fair, with people. Basically, treat each human normally. Wow, a golden rule. Imagine that, just being kind. But we've bypassed that somehow. And I'm fascinated by it because as a person who, I'm not going to say I avoid politics. I sure as hell don't. I've always had an opinion. In fact, I just pulled this shirt out of my storage the other day. It was in my storage bin. It's a George Bush shirt I should have pulled out. It's George Bush Sr. And yeah, of course it's a dual meaning. I've had this shirt for 20 something years, but before that I made my own George Bush Jr. shirts after 9/11, and it said what was it? Stop the war in Iraq, enough Bush it. And I tried to make some play on words, and it had the towers and Bush and this, because even back then, a lot of us who paid attention to what really was happening in the world were aware that we went into Iraq on false premise. We went into Afghanistan on false premise. Sure, we got bin Laden finally, but even that ended up being a disaster, right? 20 years, trillions of dollars. And so our country has always spent money on, warfare to the point where other countries are just spinning their heads thinking, holy shit, how can they even do this? How can they afford this? And why? And why out of whatever 190 countries do we have our military bases in something like over 100 of them? Why do we have over 100 and something, 180 military bases, and probably more with black ops sites? Why do we have a secret, not secret, torture program at a place called Guantanamo Bay, which is in Cuba, a country where we can get away with torture, but at the same time, a country that we treat like shit and embargo and don't let them trade because we don't want them to succeed? So all this aside, I'm an American first and foremost, but I respect all the countries around me, especially Cuba, Mexico, Canada, even Greenland. These countries are friends of ours, and now we've been treating them like complete shit. So, what this brings me to think about, and I pondered this a lot lately, experts. I'm going to admit that during COVID, I lost a lot of respect for experts, quote unquote experts. It's not that I always believed what I was told, because I've been well aware that we're lied to all the time. But here's the thing. If you're a human being, you can't know it all. You can't know everything. You have to trust some people. People who say, oh, experts are bullshit, but I trust Trump, that's a problem. Because Trump is not an expert on anything. except fucking people over and making money because that's what he's always done. So that's not, a slight. That's just a fact. That's, how he operates. So it's fascinating that people think that experts are all somehow in cahoots to fool us into thinking that, for example, climate change. People have been debating it for years. I've looked at both sides of the argument. I've looked at the how, many climate scientists say there's different levels of CO2, but they're different types of CO2. The type that's produced by industry has what they call a footprint, which can be read and compare it to naturally occurring CO2 from processes that are in nature. This is ignored. Industrial CO2 is different. We know how much of it is added. Still, we deny it. Storms get stronger every year, things get harsher. Still, we deny it. But I'm not angry at people who aren't obsessed with climate change. It's a short term thinking, that mentality that we have as humans, but especially as Americans. It's not always been this way. I mentioned this before. There was a 7 generation law within a lot of Native American cultures. Basically, you would look ahead 7 generations, like 150 years, and say, how do we make sure the decision we make today also benefits those 150 years from now? And that, to me, it's pretty amazing. I mean, thousands of years of success. But within just a few hundred years, we've allowed corporations to dominate our country, outsource all of the labor and materials and jobs to other countries, and then allowed a president to come in who blames the other countries for all our woes and problems. Aware Americans, people who understand even basic economics, know that it's not other countries' fault we're in the situation we're in. Remember when Obama bailed out the banks? Remember 2008? We had a housing crisis because they gave bad loans on purpose, knowingly and willingly, and then pulled the plug. And instead of bailing out the homeowners, who, by the way, if you are in this, my wife and I in 2004 got a house. We were able to finally, actually afford it and keep paying our mortgage. But if we had bought at that point, 4 years later, the economy collapses, housing market collapses, the loan, we end up losing our house. How does that benefit the average American? Well, in a situation like that, you would think the government would bail out the people who got screwed over by the banks. The banks claimed the people could do it because they were, sidestepping the rules. But guess what? They bailed out the bank. Trillions of dollars. Here, Goldman Sachs and, Bear Stearns, and the people went out and protested in the streets and sat there for a fucking year at the Occupy Wall Street movement. And guess what? People just called them stupid liberals. Oh, look at these hippies. Get a job. Then you'll make money and you won't worry about it. So it faded away. Time moved on. Years went past. Here we are at the crossroads of a time when there's a huge issue with world economics, but we're going to decide to allow a president to stand up with a chart claiming it to be reciprocal tariffs. And on the chart itself, all it shows is actually a trade deficit. And they made some weird, chat GPT type math to figure out, oh, we're going to give them this much tariff. I'm sure everybody's heard it by now. Madagascar, getting taxed. Even some island that doesn't even have people on it got taxed, some tariff. I don't know the full details. I also don't know if within 10 years this might not benefit America. Because I'll tell you this, if the tariffs are big enough and harsh enough, a lot of companies might move industry back to America and actually start putting their industry and companies here. But you and I both know that's total bullshit. They'll continue to do it overseas and they'll just ship it through alternate routes. just like people do with campaign donations or anything else. They find a way around. People with money, people with power have loopholes. They will get their parts shipped some other way. And the people who have the know how and the lawyers will be able to get away with it. And until the people stand up and stop being a bunch of fucking simps for billionaires, we're never going to get anything accomplished. They give you lip service, they have lobbyists, and they claim we're busting corruption, and people believe it. So, to the experts, I'm actually starting to trust experts again. The COVID thing did break my trust in experts for a while because I felt like we were being told this was highly dangerous and maybe a 5% death rate at the beginning, and maybe they didn't know, but they never corrected themselves. And my kids were out of school for over a year, having to wear masks everywhere we went. And yeah, that is bothersome. That did fuck up society. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's just, don't be such a wimp. You know, it was just what we do for each other. But the point is that you were lied to. The lab leak, it wasn't just a theory. Now they're confirming it. And we talked about this in the beginning. I had one of my videos deleted by YouTube. Hopefully this one doesn't get censored. But because I mentioned that there might be a laboratory issue where a leak occurred. And this was like a couple years after it happened when people were talking about it. And that comes back to the beginning, which comes to self-censorship or censorship in general. When I started this video, I started talking about that. And I want to make it clear that this also includes self-censorship for the fear of a lot of people who don't want to get their shit taken down. But it doesn't matter. You have to put your voice out there. I've had people tell me they want to make a YouTube channel or they want to make a blog or art project, write a book, whatever it might be. Do it, because we are slow to react to reality as a species. Okay? If you're one of the people out there who's a seeker, if you're one of the thinkers, if you're one of those guys who you wake up every morning and your brain's going a million miles an hour and you had these crazy dreams and you just have all these ideas about things that could be better and how to improve, you're an idealist, and that's okay. You're just born in the wrong time. And you can be part of a bigger change as long as you don't get caught up in somebody else's trivial bullshit. In other words, a lot of the Trump supporters would be great liberals or great supporters of Bernie Sanders. In fact, a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters said they went to Trump. And a lot of Trump supporters said they would have voted for Bernie Sanders. What does that tell you? That's a huge contrast. It shows you that it's not about left or right. It's about, holy shit, we're sick of the same old shit. We don't want an old fucking Joe Biden in there, or even Kamala. The people who follow the Democratic Party, who understand that they had no primaries and nobody was allowed to actually run that was worth a damn. Bernie Sanders, to this day, is still posting on his own fucking YouTube channel these speeches to the American people. You show me, somebody who's doing that, who's actually making sense besides him. Who else do we have? Like the Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. It really is. And so, weak men become the prominent voices. Got guys like Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro and even Matt Walsh. He wears a flannel shirt and he makes a documentary called What is a Woman? And look, I think he's funny sometimes. Some of his shit kind of caught me, especially after the last few years when the left just went off the rails. And I was like, what are you guys doing? But then he took it too far, like everyone does. It seems that everybody simped for this kind of Elon Musk Trump vibe over the last couple years. Fascinates me. It's something I don't understand, but it's something also I do understand, because I grew up as with a millennial for a son as a Gen Xer, and he's 30 now. So he was kind of the in-between. And now I have two younger kids who are 13 and 15, or 12 and 15, will be 13 and 16, or it's getting crazy. Kids get old fast, let's put it that way. But watching them grow up and the shit that they're exposed to, I've made it very clear to them, guys like Andrew Tate, they're not your friend, right? These aren't going to tell you how to be a man. These are the kind of guys who rate women on a scale and make it out to be a high value man, or tell women that they're not going to be able to reproduce in a few years, missing the point of life completely. And, hey, if you want to go drive your fucking Ferrari around and you think that that makes you a man, more power to you. But that's just my little note on there. To all the young men out there, don't buy into this bullshit. It's complete garbage. And so is the idea that, wealth is going to make you happier. Yeah, having money can get you laid. That's great, but it's not the be all end all of life. Play the long game. That's all I can say. What's important to me is playing the long game, meaning I'm not going to be ecstatic and partying and happy and doing what I want all the time. But you'll crash from that eventually. We all know the party ends eventually. You grow up, you get older. And a lot of these people who have a lot of power and fame and influence end up kind of driving themselves up the wall. And you can see it as they, evolve in what they're doing, whatever they are, actors, musicians, and they lose it. They go off the deep end, start partying too hard. And I'm like, can't you control yourself? You're making millions of dollars a year. You have a family that loves you, and you go out and it's just horrible the shit people do themselves. But life, every person has their own life to live, their own things to do. But there are some people who remain consistent. Like I would say, I guess the Ben Shapiro's of the world. He's consistent with his stupid little hat and his bullshit right-wing views. But I think about, has this guy ever picked up a shovel? Has he ever done anything blue collar or real work? And the only reason I say that is because a lot of these guys, these right wing pundits, are the kind of guys who, talk about defending the working class. And I'm like, dude, you just make money on YouTube. You're not the working class. What the fuck do you know about it? Some of them, they built their way up to it. But no, I don't. I try not to judge, but I feel people do have the right to judge those who have never really worked a real job, seeing what it's really like. Seems they're just playing lip service, So that's my voice. And my point is to give your voice. You might not agree with what I say, and that's fine. I appreciate that. Leave a comment. Tell me what you don't like about what I said, and I'll respond to it with respect, as long as you're respectful. That's the whole point. We need a little bit more discourse and understanding. Sometimes I get a little vocal about things. Obviously, I don't like Musk or Trump or any of these douchebags, but why should I? And I'd love to hear an explanation of why I should trust a billionaire with the American economy. And don't say because they're rich. This is the whole point. Like, I want to understand other people's point of view, but I have to trust the experts on the economy on this one, which brings me full circle back to trusting experts. They say that putting tariffs on everybody like this is just a horrible decision for Americans. And when he ran, he promised cheaper groceries, gas, all this. I knew it wouldn't happen. I was just like, it's amazing that his own supporters are saying, yeah, he said he's going to drop my bills and lower interest rates and, on this or that and fix my gas prices. Well, gas prices probably will go down now, but that's because they're going to crash with the trillions lost on the stock market because of tariffs. But we could get into an hour-long discussion about, well, if we put tariffs on their goods, they put tariffs on our goods, maybe people will move their factories back to America. But the reality is that will take years to happen. And if that does happen, all it's going to mean is our shit's going to cost more because it's made in America. Therefore, nobody else in other countries is going to buy our goods. So Americans are going to be expected to buy only American goods. But the truth is, most Americans will be willing to pay a little extra, even with the tariffs, because it's still going to be cheaper overseas. Because we've set up a world that is not convenient for the average American to make a good dollar. And that's from the fault of the kind of people like Trump, like Elon, who take advantage of the system and, basically fuck other people out of business because they're businessmen and that's what they do. And I live in a mentality where businessmen don't need to exist. Because you and I both know if there was a factory producing cars and the CEO doesn't show up to work, it ain't going to make a damn bit of difference whether or not that line keeps going. Because those are the guys who actually know what they're doing. So, anyway, that's enough ranting. I'll see you all next time. Yeah, like I said, a little bit on the political end, but the point being to share your voice. If you feel a certain way about any of this, do it because so many people are cowardly and afraid. And I'm not talking about the average person. I don't blame you as a human for not wanting to share your opinion because people are assholes. But for politicians to be too cowardly to stand up to what they see as wrong, shame on them. They're elected officials that my tax dollars pay. And that's fine. Trump won fair and square. He's president. I respect that. But I don't have to respect him. And I sure as hell should expect some of the people who represent my values to stand up to a guy like that and say, you're a buffoon, you're full of shit, and you don't even know what the fucking word groceries means. That one kind of tipped me off. I saw a compilation of him over the last few days just talking about groceries. It's like, yeah, hadn't heard that word. And, he talks like an idiot. People say he talks like an American. I think he talks like an idiot. And he does read and speak at a fourth or fifth grade level. And that resonates with a lot of people, I guess. I don't know. But the idea that any Americans never heard the word groceries before just blows my mind because I know how many times I've tried to afford my own. So, out of touch people and others who believe the lies they tell. And if you have a voice on it, speak up. That's all I can say. Peace and love. Talk to y'all next time. I'm sure I pissed some Trump supporter off, but it shouldn't because you should be confident in your own beliefs and your own political views to not be bothered by what I say because I'm just a stupid liberal YouTuber. Have at it. I mean, there's a lot of different terms you could call me, I guess. But I'm no fool. I'm well read. I'm educated. And I see a lie and a grift when I know it. It's just too bad too many people don't know when they're being lied to. Peace out.